What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, we are welcoming Chris to California. What's up, Chris?
What's up? It's good to be here.
How you feeling, dude? In California, dude. What's up?
Dude, I'm exhausted. I took 2 days off of work and did a 4-day weekend and basically packed up my entire 2-bedroom house and moved 1,000 miles away. And 4 days was definitely not enough. It was ambitious.
I love it. I love it, though. Yeah. Shout out Cali Chris. What's up, dude? Welcome to the greatest place in the world.
So far, so good. Still sitting in a city of boxes surrounding me everywhere,
but at least it's in the Central Coast, dude. One of the greatest places in the world. Anyway, Dan.
Yes, sir.
Hey, shout out to animals, huh? It was a sad day today. We're recording on the Tuesday before the next Monday, but shout out Stella, huh?
Yeah, miss my girl. Stella was a Jack Russell I had for 18 and a half years, and she was with me for basically, most of my adult life.
If you get 18 and a half years out of animal, you and the animal won, right?
Oh, without a doubt. And I mean, she just was the best. And now I've got Reggie, and he's the best boy. She was the best girl. And life is going on with Reg. And I feel like Stella is totally blessing us from dog Valhalla.
Yeah, well, shout out to animals. Muldoon is going to live forever. And that's what's up. So, all right, this week on the pod is Doug Carrion, who played in all your favorite bands, Dag Nasty, Descendents. He played in a band with Fletcher when he was a kid. So that's what's up. Living for today, I realize. You know you love Pennywise. What's up, fools? All right, and then, so I wanted to shout out Field Day. They got some shows coming up really, really soon. On February 24th, they're playing San Diego at the Soda Bar. February 25th, they're playing Long Beach, Alex's Bar. And on the 26th, they are playing Dr. Strange Records. Also wanted to shout out to friends of the pod, Anchorfish Printing. If you got a label, you got a distro, you got a band, you got to hit up Anchorfish. They have been printing for over 15 years. They used to be the guys, they were called Hellfish before, but this is their newer name. Get at them at Anchorfish_printing on Instagram. If you mention 185, you get 10% off. So that's what's up. And yeah, we've never done ads on this pod. I've never felt good about it. So friends of the pod, get at me. You get free shout outs whenever, just because we love you, dude. So, but yeah, get at Anchorfish. 15 years in business printing. Fuck.
I'd like to say that when OMDB did the first little shows back that we ever did after being gone for a while, Mike printed our shirts and they came out amazing. And
yeah, man.
He's a good person.
Yeah, they do it all. Shirts, hats, stickers, and some of that hat shit is gnarly. So it's good to have a good connect on hats. So yeah, Anchorfish_printing at Instagram. Get at them. Go to see Field Day. Doug Carrion was a great interview. We punished him like only me and Ben can do. And so hang on and listen to that. I think you're going to enjoy this episode. We get into everything. I think I annoy him a little bit. We get to find out who's a better surfer, him or Fletcher. And so, yeah, stay tuned and let's get on with the pod. 185milessouth.com.
Smash that Patreon button.
185 miles south, a hardcore punk rock podcast. What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, we have Doug Carrion from all your favorite bands. And Ben's helping out. We're going to jump right into this. Doug, where did you grow up and how do you get into punk rock?
Well, I grew up in Hermosa Beach, California. So what's happening, everybody? It's Doug Carrion from Hermosa Beach, California. How are you? Greetings from Los Angeles. Answering your question, I grew up in Hermosa Beach, California. And why did I get into punk rock, or how did I get into punk rock? I'm going to go with, I wanted to be able to go as fast as humanly possible. And punk rock was kind of like an extension of that. Really aggressive, kind of like fast, aggressive, wide open, full throttle lifestyle. And so that's basically it. Like I grew up in Hermosa Beach, and in that, when you have like Black Flag and the Descendents and the Circle Jerks within 1 square mile of you, what else do you need, for God's sake? I was like, there you go.
Yeah. What year are you diving into this, and what are some of the first shows you go to?
For me, I'm going to go all the way back to like 1980. And so one of the first shows that I went to that was like the first pretty over the top punk show was TSOL and Circle Jerks at the Starward Ballroom. And I'm going to go with, I might have been about 15 or 16. And that was one of those life-changing moments because, you know, punk rock is known for being very, very violent. And that was one of those ones where it's about as violent as it can get. So yeah, kind of like that. Those were some of the, that was, I guess, as memory serves me, is the first one. I had seen a band, I guess you could say kind of like a new wavy kind of punk show before that. When I was a little bit younger, I had seen the Dickies and Jim Carroll play at the country club in Reseda up that way. But the first official like Circle Jerk show, TSOL show, double bill at the Starwood on Santa Monica Boulevard. Yep.
And what about it like drew you into it instead of like scared the hell out of you?
I think that's the same thing, man. That's the same thing. So the scary part was what drew me to it.
I love it.
That's the truth, brother. Like, you know, I was doing an interview the other day. If I talk a little fast to everybody, I'm sorry. I kind of get excited, and I'm still passionate about music as I was when I was 15. So there it is. So somebody had asked me this same question. And so in my world, when I was, let's say, 13, 14, 12, 13, 14, 15, I was surfing and skateboarding, and there were things that you were doing, particularly in surfing and also in skateboarding, where you were intentionally putting yourself into harm's way in order to get better, or because it was exciting. And when I heard Black Flag or the Circle Jerks or TSOL or Descendents, for that matter, it was the same kind of crazy rush, only in music form. So what was super scary was also something that was really attractive at the same time.
Yeah. So we're talking about kind of this 1980-81 era in Southern California with bands like TSOL and the Adolescents and stuff like that. And would you say that would it be fair to say there's a distinct middle stage that happens between the old guard first generation 70s punk music and the whole 80s hardcore minor threat agnostic front, a million miles an hour hardcore? Is there a middle stage there, something in between those two things?
I would say if you're like a kind of a nerdy music historian and you really drill down into it, there would be maybe multiple stages. So let's go. I'll do my best to kind of track how things changed. When I first started going to punk shows, there was not a lot of separation between the art community and the punk community. It was one and the same. Okay. It was the same thing. And we're talking like that early 80s thing, it would have been just as common to see a performance artist playing with a punk band and an acoustic artist playing with a punk band on the same shows. Example, one of the first times I saw Bad Religion at the Whiskey A Go-Go, they played with a rockabilly band. So everything kind of was a bit of a mishmash, but a little bit later, so I'm going to say by about maybe about like 1982, 1983, it definitely got taken over in my community by the skaters and the surfers and the gang guys and the jocks. And it was just a full-blown battle. Every show was a battle. So it moved a couple of clicks removed from the art connection and moved way more into the like full high octane adrenaline connection, if that makes any sense. And then as things, you couldn't have more different of a lifestyle when you're talking about what Agnostic Front was doing and dealing with. And I can't speak for the New York hardcore scene at all, and I won't, but that's a whole different lifestyle compared to what was going on in Southern California, which was a whole nother lifestyle. So I would imagine that for a minute, there were also two very, very different, distinct hubs. As a teeny bopper, I didn't really see the difference. I just loved music, and I loved fast, aggressive music.
Right. Okay. I mean, just keeping it SoCal here, removing, the lifestyle of New York hardcore from the equation. Mm-hmm. You have mask bands in, 77, mm-hmm. and bands like X and the Alley Cats and all the Danger House stuff. Mm-hmm. And it seems like you have like a lot of surf and skate stuff happening in the South Bay and parts of Orange County, which is you and so stuff like TSOL, Adolescence, The Crowd, stuff in the Valley like the Dickies, Angry Samoans of Fear, which is still punk, and then but definitely faster and harder and different than these mask bands. And then it seems like a couple years later you have like full on Suicidal Tendencies, gang shit, Million Miles an Hour, Mystic Records, like 400 bands that are playing, that fast beat that come out of nowhere. And I see that as like stages of an evolution. Is that fair?
Dude, not only is it fair, that's probably a pretty good, I guess I'm going to kind of take a little bit of I'm going to take a deviation on topic, but slightly ahead of when we start talking about some of the records we're going to talk about in some of the other segments. Would you believe it that TSOL, their first EP, Bad Religion, How Could Hell Get Any Worse, and the Blue Adolescence record, and Circle Jerks Group Sex, I would have to look up Descendents because I'm going off the top of my head, all were recorded within a 6-month period of each other?
Yeah, late 80, early 81, around there.
Blow your mind. Then when you think, which is, I live in over by Universal Studios in Studio City up that way, in, just north of Hollywood. Would you believe that the Adolescence record, the TSOL record, and How Could Hell Be Any Worse were all recorded in North Hollywood within like a 3-mile area of each other in the same 6-month period? So, whoa, kind of crazy. I apologize for nerding out, but I scratched my head and I'm like, damn, that was some fertile soil. Freaking people going swinging for the bleachers in a very compact time time area and geographic area as well.
Yeah, I think that you nailed into like kind of the records that he's talking about. Is those records are kind of in between like that Danger House scene, and then you had a band that was on the Party Animal comp, like a Mystic comp, and it's like, so by like 84, 85, like hardcore is like blown wide open. There's like 40 bands on comps and shit.
Nardcore, all that stuff.
Yeah, right. So he's just saying, like, is there a musically, is there something in between like that mask scene and full blown shredder hardcore?
I'm gonna go with if you're using that blunt of an object, like that, then no, it is kind of like there is no other group. It kind of went from, the Hollywood people were pretty like, some of the Hollywood people kind of were a little bit older. You know what I mean? They were already over 21 or whatever, where when the next crop, like, man, 5 years between a kid that's 15 and somebody that's 21, that's a giant distance. And so I think that it was just the next crop of people that were going to go at the punk thing were younger, and it just came off faster. So I don't really think there was a middle ground as that, late 70s crew got older, got more experimental into the drug culture or whatever that is, died off, got burned out, whatever they were doing. The next group of kids were like coming at it with maybe even a sharper sword. But there's no, I don't believe there's any, in answering your question, I'm sorry, I don't believe there's any middle ground. It was like, it was a transition from one into the other.
Right on. And you're sort of part of that, because you do a band called Con 800 in 82, I believe, is when your demo was recorded. And this is pretty wild. Not a lot of people know about this, but Fletcher, who later becomes the guitar player of the band Pennywise, is the guitar player. And a few other notable people are in it. A member of a guy who ends up in, is it Nip Drivers? Did I get that right?
Yeah. And he ended up playing in China White.
Oh, in China White. Okay.
Hank ended up going in those two bands. Correct. Kind of rad.
and so Con 800 to my ears sounds like some maybe there's a little bit of an East Coast hardcore influence. Like maybe you started getting those
for sure
Discord records.
So I'll try to explain kind of my world and how that came about. So Fletcher and I kind of grew up not even a half a mile away from each other, like very close to each other. So we were friends as kids. Let's start with that. Everybody hung out at the same kind of like watering hole, if you will, where we would skateboard at like this school. And at this school called Robinson, which is about 2 blocks from my house, that was also where we used to have band practices. So we're going, I'm pretty young. Maybe I'm like in 10th grade, like, something like that. So I don't know if 1982 is accurate, but let's just go with that for a second. Whatever. I won't challenge that. But so by the time, maybe, we were all kind of hanging out and doing the punk thing and going to shows and all that stuff. But now in comes the second, I guess you could say, character into the story, which is this guy named Scott Ziegler. Now, Scott was a kid that I grew up with, and I knew him from grade school way back. Scott was the guy that introduced me to like The Fall, Joy Division, a lot of what was coming out of England, and he was even punk before I was punk and already over it. So Scott used to kind of give me a hard time being like, dude, how could you be listening to Wasted Youth? Like, why would you listen to those records? Like, you should be listening to Joy Division and Lemon Kittens and the Swell Maps and all these really noisier, angular bands. That's why, as I was experimenting, yes, I could do a hardcore thing with Fletcher because Fletcher and I loved Minor Threat records and stuff like that. But I also, like, the band you're referencing from the Mystic compilations was a lot, to me, to my ear, a lot like The Birthday Party. Very, very noisy. So, those are kind of almost like two lanes. Also, I got to see the Minutemen like as a kid, and that was just a huge influence on what punk could be if you even want to call what they do punk, like just its own weird abstract chop, angular. Like I got what Gang of Four was doing from Scott, but then I go and I like start listening to the Minutemen, and I'm like, holy smokes, D Boon and Mike Watt and George are doing their own flip on that Southern California style. So that's why I can maybe I can ride both sides of the fence, where I was very comfortable with noisier projects. I started listening to, Kraftwerk and bands way back when, The Cure and all that stuff, when it was super uncool. In my like skater punk world, that would have been like a no-fly zone. But in my more arty punker world, that's what they listened to. They were kind of already over the wasted youths of the world, if you will. They wouldn't like a GBH,
Right.
So.
And so Con 800, how long were you together, and did you play what notable shows did you play? How far did you get?
So Con 800 was definitely more like a backyard party band, and notable, I would say Con 800, it might have gone, Fletcher had it before, and then the singer that they had kind of bailed, and so I stepped in. And in the time that I was in the band, I guess you could say might have been its busiest, where we did its most backyard parties and stuff like that. Keep in mind, in Hermosa Beach, California, the cops were not having any shows. They hated the punkers. Black Flag got run out of town, and there was all kinds of problems there. We were kind of like the next, you turned the page and here comes Con 800. So we were public enemy number one down there as well. And so it didn't really have too long of a run, maybe a year and a half or 2 years. And I would say the most notable would be playing house parties that were full destruction house parties, where like the poor kid that put on the party, like his house got, $100,000 worth of damage. I mean, those were wild punker shows, punker parties, beach punker parties. So if that answers your question, it didn't go very far. And then I kind of bailed out of that and was doing way more of the experimental stuff. And then as I left out of the experimental stuff, then I started playing in Descendents.
Doug, who was a better surfer, you or Fletcher? And
me.
Who charged harder?
Me, for sure.
Right on.
There's no hesitation. Me. Fletcher, no disrespect to the tall guys, but usually the small guys kind of get it. I'm a small guy, so I got it.
Yeah, right on.
Now, and it's on a whole different, on the same thread, believe it or not, Con 800 just played a show. Like, we play one time every 10 years or whatever. We just played a show in July of 2021. You could Google it, and like there's shows of us, not very many old ones, but current ones of Fletcher and I playing, it's doing it in, 2018 and 2021, that kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah, rad.
Yeah, someone bootlegged the demo. It's a 14-song demo on a 7-inch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want it. So someone get at me, 185 miles south at gmail.com and hook it up.
It's blistering. I mean, what's amazing is it's like, I'm going back to the, like, for being a small guy, I have a very kind of like raspy, weird, hardcore voice. So it's like, whoa, how does all that screaming come out of that guy? And it's like, just, that's what happens. You start blasting those really fast bar chords and and away you go. But if you were to, even the current Con 800 stuff or the video or the demos or whatever, you go, yep, that's when I'm doing the kind of more aggressive hardcore, we'll call it the minor thready kind of vocal. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, right on. See, you alluded a bit to the band Incest Cattle that you were in that was on the Party Animal comp. Can you talk a little bit about how that comes about, like getting on a Mystic comp? And then did you ever have any interactions with Doug Moody?
Yes, interactions with Doug Moody, only in that he was a bit of a character, and he was the guy that would be like, here, sign here, and you like sign your publishing away. So there you go. I want to say we recorded twice with him, maybe once or twice. And the way it came about was, let's see. So living in Hermosa Beach, very close to Hermosa Beach, about 3 miles away, was a venue called The Barn. And the Barn is where I saw Descendents and Circle Jerks and, those kinds of shows. One of the bands that I saw at the Barn was this band called the Mongrels. And the Mongrels were a very birthday party-esque band. Very, very, very noisy. John Napier, who's now deceased, was the singer in that band. And when I wasn't doing the Con 800 thing, he had asked me, he's like, dude, I know you play bass. Would you be interested in jamming? I want to start a new project. And so we started this project called Incest Cattle. That was, I'm going to say probably more it's definitely more of an art project than it was a punk project. It was a very peculiar, angular band. We did one demo. The demo was recorded by Paul Cutler and Don Bowles, both of the Germs and 45 Grave. You could find that on a cassette that Craig Ibarra does out of San Pedro. And I want to say it's Water Under the Bridge is the really, really small mom and pop record label that does it. And like, you could find the demo. It floats out there on cassette for, I don't know what, $1 or $10 or whatever it is. If you want to do a deep dive on some of my noisier, very, very birthday party, angular music, running side when I was wearing that hat, when I wasn't wearing the punk hat, or maybe they're both punk. Maybe they're both punk. I don't know.
I mean, it's on Party Animal, so it's pretty punk, and the saxophone sounds punk.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, do you remember being at Mystic? Do you have any memories of that other than signing away all your rights?
I remember the studio being an upstairs studio. It was pretty musty and smelly. It was at the corner of Selma and Vine, which would have been half a block away from ... where we would go, the Café de Grand. So it was literally like a parking lot away. I remember Doug Moody telling me something along the lines of that was where Led Zeppelin recorded Whole Lot of Love, or did overdubs for Whole Lot of Love or something like that. It was pretty dumpy. It's a pretty dumpy studio, dumpy studio with an office. But there you go. That's how that was back then.
Yeah. It's funny that Led Zeppelin keeps coming up, because I believe that the Bobby Fuller 4 and Richie Valens recorded in that studio, or at least their record label was out of that address. And it's like, right. Why would you, I mean, okay, if Led Zeppelin actually recorded there, cool, brag about it. But why would you need to make something up like that when you had Richie Valens under your belt? But anyway, I digress. Let's talk about Descendants. Descendants, how did you join the Descendants? And was joining the Descendants kind of like, joining the Beatles at the time? Was it like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm in this band now that I look up to and I've been going to see all these years? Or was it more like you were just buddies with them?
So it kind of goes like this. Bill and Milo are a couple grades older than me. And when I was a freshman in high school, Bill and I had the same public speaking class. And I would always, again, I wanted to go as fast as humanly possible and surf and skateboard. And so I would always do public speaking demonstrations and speeches about surfing and skateboarding. And Bill, who was very, very eccentric, would always do speeches and stories about fishing and fishing. So he would be the guy, bless his freaking heart, that would like get up in front of the class and explain why this fishing rod worked in this particular way, or why smoking fish was, like he had like a smoker that you could smoke fish, things like that. So that's how we became friends. I did not know Milo other than I knew Milo from around school, and he was a couple grades older than me. Then a little bit later, when I was a sophomore, Bill was really in his fishing, stinky, wear a sleeping bag to school phase. So Bill looked more like a homeless guy at school and we were still friendly and so forth. A couple years later, I'm moving a little bit further on the clock. When I was in Incest Cattle, we talked about this. Bill used to run at the track at the high school because Bill's used to live close by there. Paul, the drummer of Incest Cattle, worked at the high school as a janitor. Drummers talk. Paul had given Bill a demo, the one that Paul Cutler and Don Bowles did, that demo, and had said, yeah, I'm in a band with Doug. Do you know Doug? And Bill's like, yeah, I know Doug. I remember him from school. Okay. Snapshot a little bit later, maybe about 2 years later, I'm walking my dog and I'm not at home. And in Hermosa Beach, it's a very, very small town. And I go to my door and there's this scribbled note taped to my door. And it's like, hey, Doug, it's Bill. I was wondering if you could call me at SST. This is pre-answering machines or anything like that. It's like, that's how far back this story goes, ladies and gentlemen. And so a little bit later that day, I called him up and he was at SST. He comes down from SST, which was at Artesia and Inglewood, which you figure is about 3 miles from my home in Hermosa, comes down to the beach house. He's very kind of secretive. And he says to me, at the time he's in Black Flag. And he says, basically, I'm in Black Flag. I'm getting ready to leave Black Flag. I'm doing a Descendents record. Tony can't do it because Tony has full-time work obligations. Would you be interested in trying out? And I'm like, yes. And he says, where do you practice? And I said, right here at the house in the basement. And he's like, I have my drums in the car. I'm like, load them around back, baby. And we loaded it in. And Bill and I did our first bass and drum jam where we probably played and just ripped the neighbors apart for about 2 hours. We stopped. We walked to La Pinita, which was a half a block away. Yes, the same La Pinita from the Green Field Day record. We had burritos. We put my bass equipment back in his gray VW bus. We drove out to SST. We practiced even more with Ray. And kind of like by that night, like Bill and I didn't separate. Like he came back to my house and slept on my floor and would park his van up the block. And I was in the band and it just was like that. So there's that. Was it like joining the Beatles? That might be a little bit of a thing. It's certainly a band that I absolutely loved, but the band wasn't really that popular. So, let's keep in perspective. Milo Goes to College sold 2,000 records. So you're not talking about a band that's like gigantic. You're talking about a baby band still, if that answers your question there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they're just one of these bands who their popularity grows every time they break up, which has happened quite a few times at this point. Mm-hmm. Their popularity just seems to mushroom.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. And I can say, like, for, I'm going to go back to the lyric, couldn't sell out a telephone booth, that's a real statement. And, know that I'm still friends with them and I care for them and I love them and we're still buddies. Like, we're friends. I would say we did a bazillion shows to 6 people, a bazillion. And the band would just murder it. And it would be like, hold on, ladies and gentlemen. And we were so good. And you play to 6 people and baby, that's all it was, 6 people. And that's where you were. And you're in Tuscaloosa or some strange city. So to put things in perspective, there were more shows playing to under 10 people than there were playing to over 300 people or over 100 people. Like it's a whole different, just put it in perspective, man. It's like, that was a band that was like on an independent record label. There's very, very little infrastructure. You're going into these markets you're going into cities where there might be literally 10 punk people. And you're just crossing your fingers and hoping all 10 show up.
Wow. So there's hope. So there's hope for me and Zach's bands that have played to like 3 people. That maybe one day we'll be like the Descendents and like, sell out anywhere we go.
I'm gonna go with maybe. And then on the other hand, like, do you have fun when you play?
Of course.
Then that's it. That's the answer. None of the other stuff, like 3 people, 300 people, 3,000 people, 30,000 people. If you're leaning into it and you feel like, yes, that was the best show ever, it doesn't matter how many people were there. It's that you got off your couch, you threw your stuff in the car, you went to the venue, and you freaking swung for the bleachers. That's it, man. That's what it's about. All the other stuff is sometimes, I don't know, maybe extra.
So tell us about Enjoy. So Enjoy is the one Descendents album that you played on, 1986, and you co-wrote quite a few of the songs on that record. One of which is Sour Grapes, which I have heard people say Sour Grapes is my favorite Descendants song, which is, a tall order for a band with so many great songs. Do you remember what in that song you wrote and do you remember actually writing it?
Of course. I wrote all the music, and I wrote the music on an acoustic guitar that was given to me by Carol Shakely, sitting on my front porch at 230 33rd Street in Hermosa Beach, watching the waves, and the waves were not very good. And I was like, oh, I got an idea for a song. And I wrote it on acoustic guitar, and Bill was a better songwriter than I was. And I showed him kind of like, here's the parts, dude. And he's like, dude, that's kind of crazy. He's like, well, if you do this here and you do that there and you do this there, it just might be a song. And so Bill helped with the orchestration because he's really good at that. Milo leaned in on the words because that's Milo's great at lyrics, as is Bill, way better than I am. And that was maybe one of the first times the Descendents played a song like that with a much more straighter bass line, meaning the Joy Division, Cure, Ramones, Doug style of straight line, as opposed to how phenomenal Tony is. He's super busy. How phenomenal Carl is, super busy. Like, I can play like that, but I don't play like that. But those ninjas do, and they're great at it. But that would be a song that, like, that was one of those straight 8s, straight 16s. There you go. Right. There you go.
So now I don't know the order of events here, but you join an incarnation of Doggy Style that has Brian Baker. At some point, that band becomes Doggy Rock, and you leave the Descendents. But I don't know. Can you walk us through that? Like,
sure. So it goes. You're pretty close. I think you just have it flipped a little bit. So I'm in Descendents, and while I'm in Descendents, we're getting ready to play in Washington D.C. And I knock, open the door, and lo and behold, it's the first time seeing Dag Nasty with Sean on vocals. Okay, Sean Brown on vocals. I had met Ian the summer before. I had never met Brian. This would have been the first time I had ever met Brian. And Dag Nasty was great. The following winter, we are up in Buffalo, and Dag Nasty goes out to see, they're going to go out and do about 8 shows or so with Descendents. This time, Brian has Dave on vocals. Okay. And then the following summer, Descendents are getting ready to go out and do another run of shows. And Descendents are probably doing 90 shows or more. And Dag Nasty is going to jump on about 25 of them or 30 of them. Okay. And so this time, it's Peter on vocals. Now, in that really quick period of time, and I'll answer your question, I did not forget it. What's amazing about Dag Nasty is in that very, very quick period of time, Brian had gone through 3 singers, recorded a record. Dave had already done I think Dave only did 7 shows or 8 shows total. And I got to see all the shows they did with Peter. So, there's that. as that tour came to a close, okay, I was kind of winding down my working with Descendents and looking toward, well, what's next? Okay. Brian had decided to come out to Los Angeles, and we were like, hey, maybe we'll do a project together or whatever. During that time, okay, so you're talking like late 86. During that time, Brad from Doggy Style doesn't have players, and I'm friends with Brad through the Descendents and blah, 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 blah. And we were like, sure, we'll help you record a record. And that's what that Doggy Rock record was. And then as that kind of, this is again in a teeny period of time, 3 months, like a really short period of time. By the time that had already run its course, Brian and I were in Hermosa Beach writing songs for the Wig Out at Dankos record. So very, very quick, like talk about moving a mile a minute. By the time that tour had ended in the summer, Brian comes out and is hanging out with me in Southern California. We record the Doggy Style record because Brad doesn't have players. Brian's ready to get back to the East Coast. He wants to reboot Dag Nasty. We start writing Godfather and blah, 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 all written in Hermosa Beach at the 230 33rd Street house while we're eating La Panita. Like, that's how that went down.
And is that a conversation that you guys have? He's just like, let's write these songs and you're going to join the band? Or how do you get asked to join the band?
Well, first off, Brian and I were pretty good friends. So let's start there. I think for him, he, at that time, he's a guy that kind of wants to move on and keep going and chipping away at it. He's a wonderful guitar player and a great songwriter. And I think he knew that there really wasn't going to be much future with the Doggy Style thing. He kind of, he just didn't see that having a lot of legs. I didn't learn until way later that he had already asked Roger if Roger would do Dag Nasty. And I think Roger was off, didn't want to do it for whatever reason. And I hope I'm not goofing my story up. But I'm pretty sure that that's how that went down. And then Brian was like, look, I'm going to go back to the East Coast. I'm going to reboot Dag Nasty. Do you want to take a swing at it? And that was kind of the way it unfolded. And I just took out my record player and put on Can I Say and started learning songs. And then once I kind of had a bunch of songs under my belt, then we started working out ideas, like Exercise and Godfather and songs like that. You know what I mean? Just started working on songs.
So did you leave the Descendents because you moved to the East Coast, or did you get asked to leave the Descendents? How did that
No way, dude. No way. Like those guys. No, I did not. There's never been any bad blood, and I didn't get asked to leave. So how that goes is kind of like this. Remember the tour I was just talking about that Dag Nasty split. Okay. Yes. So at the end of that tour, Descendents end up in Minneapolis, and we're staying with Grant Hart from Husker Du. And we're kind of starting to work on songs for the next record. Okay. Now for me, I really love that Milo Goes to College 1 minute, 30 second kind of like nugget. And Bill was leaning a little bit more into the here in my van process of weeding out direction of writing. Neither are better, worse, right, wrong. I knew that the next batch of songs, I was like, I think I'm going to kind of take a swing at doing some writing with Brian. And I don't think Bill was like, he wasn't hurt or bummed or anything like that. Keep in mind, it was literally like friends just like, okay, dude, call me if you need anything. Okay, no problem. No big deal. So there was no animosity. In fact, I seem to remember after I had left, Bill, being the nice guy that he is, like would come to my house and like write me a check for like I don't know, whatever, $8 or $800 or whatever the Descendents that last tour had made, and so we've never had any bad blood at all. And I think it was just not even a difference of opinion as much as just difference of writing direction, and where I was trying to kind of harness closer to a Milo Goes to College punk nugget, and he wanted to do a little bit more stretching, a little bit further out on more parts, and so forth. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. That makes sense. Kind of a difference in musical direction between you two.
Yeah, and not personal at all. Like, no way. Okay. No way. Just like, okay. Keep in mind, you're not talking about like there was not a career path with Descendents. There wasn't a career path. It was literally grinding it out, playing to 6 people. So how could he be bummed or whatever? In fact, just at Punk Rock Bowling just recently in 2021, Bill and I talked about this, and his explanation is, dude, I just had to keep going. I had no choice. He kind of, he just, in a way, didn't really feel, maybe he felt bad a little bit that, like, that I was leaving, but he was just like, dude, I got to keep going. I'm kind of like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Right. So I have to keep grinding. So neither one of us felt like there was never any bad blood or anything like that. And he for sure, like, just had to, he's like, dude, I'm sorry. I had to keep grinding. Meaning, he needed to, like, hey dude, we're going back out on tour. Hey dude, we're going back out on tour. We're going again. Right. That was what he had to do. So did you move to Washington, D.C. after joining Dag Nasty? Yes. When was that? 87? Yeah. So it's actually late 86 going into 87. So we moved there. Like, I seem to remember that we got there and it hadn't started snowing yet, but it definitely started snowing. So it was, by the time it was 87, we were there, living at Dag House, rehearsing a lot. We had already had enough songs for Wig Out at Dankos. We were rehearsing up in Bethesda at Colin's house. And by March of 87, we were at Inner Ear recording. So talk about moving fast, dude. We were moving really fast. Yeah. And so how would you describe the differences between the SoCal scene and the DC scene around that time, 86, 87? Was there a bit of a culture shock, or was it kind of like the same deal, but colder weather? 3000% totally different world. So first off, I will go on record saying the people in DC hated me. They hated me. One, because I wasn't part of their 15 original people that saw Bad Brains at the art gallery or whatever like that. I wasn't in the in squad. Second, I was with Brian, and maybe, we like Roger better than we like Doug or whatever it was. Third, DC is a very funny, they're a funny way where anytime anything looks the slightest bit like capitalism, or like you're trying to make something more popular, that bums them out. So for them, well, let's look at it like this. In my perspective, I'm like, oh, wow, we're playing a show. Maybe the idea is we should tell people. So instead of 6 people showing up, 60 people show up, or 160. So I'm a big proponent of you stand on top of the mountain and you tell people, like, hey, come out to the show. A lot of the DC people are like, we only want to do shows to our friends, and then our band's going to break up. Like, so talk about totally different, like, couldn't be more different, more different. Like I'm, hey, let's try to tell people about the show. And for them, you remember, both of you guys might even know, there was a time where they might have done shows and not even made flyers. just like only that 12 people or whatever it was would go to the show.
Doug, where do you think that comes from? Why do you think DC was like that?
Can you give me 1 second to think that through?
Sure.
I'm gonna go with, because that's an extension of putting on one hat and doing a different thing. So I think that has to do with politics.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an extension of a lot of their families working in government, a lot of their families, I don't know. What does that mean? I don't know what that means other than they were, it's kind of like, do you know, like, how could I put, they were almost against capitalism, like anti-capitalism. Anything that would have a whiff of capitalism was a no. So, and you know what? I'm not going to say that to like toss those people under the bus. Like, that's just how they rock. For example, I still talk to Ian, and the fact that like that guy would not be in Rolling Stone or whatever magazine, because dude, you guys sell alcohol and you sell tobacco. Like, I can't be in your magazine. And that he held that ideal this whole time. That's badass. Like, awesome. I can't judge and say that that's wrong. I can only say like, wow, it's kind of rad. It's kind of rad. His ideals and sticking to his ideals. And one of those things is, they're really quite, that crew is kind of sensitive of things looking too sales-like, you know what I mean? Too salesman-like, you know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe it's that they're because they're the ones that I've met in the DC world, bright, very, very smart. So maybe they don't want to come off being ostentatious and gaudy. So they're way more subtle. I don't know. That's a question for some of that crew.
Keeping it on the subject on the topic of Ian. So Ian Mackay produces Wig Out at Danko's with Don Zientara Engineering at Inner Ear Studios. Like a lot of stuff on Discord in the 80s was done. Do you remember when you were recording that record, what Ian actually did as a producer?
Well, so I think I'm going to go with, yes, I do. And there's a couple of funny things that kind of go with this story. So here's what it is. Know that at that time, when you do recordings with Ian, it's the Ian show. Okay. And so what you're doing is you're taking your batch of ideas and you're running it. And then Ian's kind of like trying to mix it or EQ it or make it sound good. And then it goes through his filter of like how he really thinks it should be mixed. And then it pops out the other side. So that's the way it works. Silly Doug, when we went to record the Wig Out at Danko's record, I actually asked Ian about bringing in an outside producer. And I didn't know how committed he was to documenting DC bands. That's what he was doing. I didn't really wrap my head around that, where he's really, I maybe even and I don't say in a negative way, I say in a positive way, he's kind of like a purist, and he was really trying to capture that, and he was chasing a vibe, and that's how that was. One of the best things that he did as far as a producer goes, in my opinion, was not allowing the band members to be there when he mixes. That's fascinating. So he would mix the record. Back then, he would put things on cassette. Everybody got it on cassette. They would write their notes, send the notes back to Ian, and he would maybe consider or throw your note in the trash, one of the two, and away were the mixes. So the idea, when you ask, well, what did he do production-wise? He kind of kept the recordings going and on track, but I think his biggest strength was making sure there wasn't a lot of arguing and BS amongst band members by removing band members from the mixing stage.
Right. And then
fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And it makes sense because everyone wants their own instrument turned up louder than the rest of the band.
And he's a pretty diplomatic guy. So it's funny how you can get to the same answer only with less arm wrestling.
Right.
Fascinating.
So
fascinating.
When you were in Dag Nasty, you play on 2 albums, We Got a Denkos and Field Day. What songs did you write for Dag Nasty? I had trouble finding that for songwriting credit.
So with the exception of Safe, and there's like Safe, and I can't remember off the top of my head. There's maybe like 2, maybe Fall. There might be one third one, and I apologize. I can't remember off the top of my head. Those would have been maybe Trying, maybe. Those would have been ideas that predate Doug, that Brian had. He might have even had as far back. I didn't have anything to do with. All the other stuff that I played on, I definitely had something to do with the writing, because Brian and I would sit 2 feet across from each other, and I would try to play the steadiest bass line possible to his arpeggios and or finger picking. So kind of like simultaneously that was happening at the not the Fall or Trying or Safe. Those were kind of like already mapped out. But when you listen to the stuff with the straighter lines, Exercise or Godfather, things like that, for sure like that. On the Wig Out record. When we got to the Green Field Day record, a lot of it is the same, only I would have to think about like Things That Make No Sense would be a Doug song. I would have to Trouble Is would be a Brian idea. I would have to go back and look at the sequencing on all that stuff, but it was what was different about that record ... was when we started showing off ideas for the record, we knew it was going to be a wide there were going to be a bunch of tent posts and different bases on the record, as far as areas and different lines that we were going to take on that. So that was that. And then the other one also was we did that record where we rehearsed and did pre-production like 30 days back to back. Like every day we would rehearse every day. And so by the time we got to actually tracking it, the band was crazy tight and we tracked all that stuff. Most of the drum tracking was done in a day and a half, like very fast, because the band was already like, we would approach that recording. I don't know how Nirvana recorded Bleach, but let's say the same way Nirvana recorded Bleach, or how Black Sabbath would just like set up and record it as if they're doing a live show. And then you go back and clean it up. That's kind of how we did that record, where it was like, by the time we started getting into the 20th day, we could play all the songs as if it was a 45-minute show, all the way down top to bottom. Here we go. So we were very, 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 very well rehearsed going in.
And so obviously there's a big change in sound between Can I Say and Wig Out. I mean, it's a different singer. And then there's also a huge change in sound between Wig Out and the Field Day LP. Was there a sense of the fans did you sense a backlash from any of the Dag Nasty fans in the direction Dag Nasty was going?
For sure. 3,000%. But I'm going to back up a teeny bit and say and share some information with you about Can I Say and about We Got a Denkos. In Europe, when they did that CD with both records, a lot of people didn't even know it was two different singers. Wrap your head around that. You go, wait a minute, what? Like, I've talked to multiple people who are like, dude, we just thought it was one record. Like, we didn't even know there were two different singers. We just like all the songs. So they think of it as a bottleneck, which is amazing. When you go, wow, that's really wild. So on to when we started doing the Wig Out at Danko's material live, it was great. It was pretty well, people really responded to it well. We were kind of mixing in the Can I Say and the Wig Out at Danko's stuff, and we were off to the races. When we started doing the Field Day material, the band, by that time we had brought in Scott Garrett, and Scott's a really, really, really good drummer. So the band was freaking incredible. The fans did not like that record. They did not like the record. We're talking like, oh shit, not one of those songs. Now in retrospect, we didn't really remember before where I was talking about like not necessarily worried about like, here's the single and the capitalism part or anything of that. Like, we just went and played the songs and figured if you're going to like it, you're going to like it. And if you weren't, we were like kind of bummed you didn't like it, but we were like, okay, well, dude, there's probably another awesome band rehearsing right now in their garage and you should go check them out. But I know we didn't even have the wherewithal, if you will, to like just play the fast songs and then write another record. Like, we would just straight up play La Pinita or, just like super, super slow songs. And punkers would just be like, wait a minute, we want to hear Circles. Wait a minute, where's 1 to 2? This isn't my Dag Nasty. So it was pretty funny in a way, because like we had maybe maybe stretched it a bit too far or outgrown the audience a little bit with that batch of material was just too much. It was just too much for them. And I'm going to go with across the board thumbs down, like 25 thumbs down and many, many middle fingers and many, many play faster. Play fasters. So that's where that is.
All Ages Show is like one of your best songs. It comes out like on a single in 87, but it never makes like the LPs of that time. Why is that? Like, why not take a song that dope and put it on an LP?
Now, I with no disrespect, wasn't that tacked on to the Field Day record?
I think it was on a later release, no?
I think it was tacked on to maybe the CD and cassette version, but not the vinyl version, something like that.
Then I would agree with you on that. Like, in my jagged brain, I seem to remember it might not have made it on the vinyl, but it made it on the CD as like a bonus track or whatever. And so in answer to your question, I think that's how it unfolded. We did the All Ages Show recording. For my ear, the songs are great, but I think for my ear, it was a little bit too, maybe came off a little bit too butt rock, a little bit too butt rock. And we're like, oh shit, we got to I hope I can curse. We got to recalibrate. And so, the next time we recorded, because we spent a lot of money to record that 7-inch. It was a lot of money for us, because we're like a baby punker band or whatever. So by the time it came to recording the Green Field Day record, our approach was, we're going to go in a smaller studio where we have a little bit more time and really try to create some more textures, as opposed to trying to pick a great studio where like, okay, guys, you got to get the record done in 2 days. Like, we just didn't want to do that, And so that's how that is. And why it never appeared anywhere else, I think it just has to do with the timing in which those songs were released. And Giant wanted to tack it on as the CD, because remember, CDs were kind of newish at that time. That was kind of a new thing.
Right. And so you all relocate to, is it Hermosa Beach or?
Yeah.
So you convince everyone to move back to your hometown with you, which is great. I'm sure. How does Dag Nasty come to an end?
Wait, Doug, before you answer that, like, how does that even come up in conversation? Like, you're all hanging out in DC. You're like, hey, you guys all want to move to California? What's up?
I'm gonna go with. Do you remember the part about? Well, let's go with this. Dag Nasty were outsiders in Washington D.C. Okay, we're at, we were just on our own island. We were freaking on our own island. Like, we did okay, but we were always off doing shows, so we didn't. In a way, DC is awesome, and its desire to be cliquey is what kills it, what makes it not fun. And there was a point where it was like, it just wasn't super fun. It was like everybody was pissed off at each other or had a grudge with each other or whatever. And, keep in mind that, like, the Dag guys at that time, when we were living at Dag House, we would drink beer and have fun and, cause trouble. I mean, you're in your early 20s. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Where the other, there were a lot of other people in the DC area that looked at that with a little bit of, I don't know about those guys. So by the time we had done the 87 record with Ian, and I could only assume Ian would have gladly done the next record too, but we started having conversations with Giant Records, and we really knew that there wasn't any, we didn't have to be tethered to DC. So when we moved back to California, there was a point where we were spending a little bit of time in California, a little bit of time in DC, and we would work the West Coast, work the East Coast, and then in the summer do a big lap. And that was how we mapped out our years. But that was kind of, that's kind of how that unfolded. Was Peter's a very, very, very eccentric guy. So for him, being in the DC, he doesn't even want to be in the DC bubble. He's like in his own bubble. Brian was just doing his own thing. Scott would have been also. Scott was more like, if you're talking the DC scene, like, Scott would have been way more like going to Trouble Funk shows, like way over in the go-go community. He had a lot more friends in the go-go community than he did in the punker community. So it just really was like, we didn't really need to stay there. And when we had brought Scott into the band, Scott kind of was like, hey dude, you're a great drummer. Do you want to join the band? Yes. We're moving to California. Are you okay? Yes. Okay. And 10 days later, Scott was on a plane and came out. That's how it was. We didn't really need to, to stay there. So there just wasn't really a ton of upside. It wasn't really a ton of upside. Brian, if you look at interviews with Brian and him and the way he talks about it, it's like Brian wants to be in a national act. He doesn't want to be in an act that's based in DC that plays to the same 16 people and then breaks up. That wasn't what he wanted to do at all. And look at his interviews. He says that loud and clear. It's like he wants to play guitar, and he wants to try to get better at guitar and play, okay, tonight we're playing at, the teeny place. Maybe if we work really hard, we could play at a place that's a 200-seater and maybe get a 300-seater or whatever. He wanted it to progress, and it just didn't look like it was going to progress staying there. And all those interviews just speak for themselves.
Yeah. And so how does Dag Nasty end? Because you guys break up probably around 88, not that long after Field Day comes out, right?
Mm-hmm. So we could do the Field Day tour, and when we're done with the Field Day tour, by that time, I think two things are happening. One is Guns N' Roses are becoming very popular, and Brian's like, well, I could play guitar like that. And so Brian starts setting his sights on moving up to, he wants to be on a major label, on a rock band that's on a major label. And there's nothing wrong with that. Great. The Field Day record did not bear very well at first, ... I'm going to come back to that. It didn't bear very well at first with the fans, even though the record sold really well. It sold really, really well. In fact, in Europe, that record was one of those ones that was like, you know, when you go into like the youth hostels and stuff and the coffee shops and all like that, that was the record. They didn't have We Got It Dankos, and they didn't have Can I Say. They had the Green Field Day record. So a lot of the European people in Germany and such, that was their gateway in. And they love that record. That's like, so that record had its own legs and kind of continued in there are a lot of people that's their favorite record. How it ended up breaking up, by the time you're talking about like September, October of 88, Brian is definitely moving on and he's going to join Junkyard. Scott is wondering what to do. Peter's back in DC, and, you know, I kind of am the guy that has to call Peter and Scott and say, look, I think Brian's out of here. Let's just call it a day. And everybody shook hands, and that it came to a close. The smarter thing would have been for everybody to take a break and then come back to it. But, you know, Dag Nasty, you know, that was like, Brian didn't really have any interest of kind of, I don't know, pursuing it anymore, or he wanted to put it on a hiatus, and that's how that unfolded.
Let's jump way ahead. And you start a band called Field Day. How does that come about? What's the idea behind it?
Well, Field Day is kind of like an extension of Dag Nasty, and it's Peter Kortner and myself, Peter from the We Got It Dankos record and the Green Field Day record, myself, kind of continuing on as writers from almost like a time warp all the way into 2018. So you could count on your toes how many years later that is. I don't know how many years later that is.
30 exactly.
Is it 30 to the day?
Well, 1988, 88 to 2018 is 30 years.
See, you're so good at math. So how that comes about is this. I end up getting a couple of emails a week where people are like, dude, when are you could you guys ever do that We Got It Dankos material live? Hey, would you ever consider doing that? Where's Brian? Where's Peter Kortner? Blah, 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 blah. So I seem to be the guy that always gets those emails, because I'm kind of like, yeah, I have social media and people, I don't live in a cave. And so really, you know, that's kind of what started it. And at the beginning, we were trying to figure out with Brian if Brian could do it or would do it. And Peter and I and Brian kind of had jumped on a couple of phone calls. And then, as it turned out, Brian was getting ready to go into a Bad Religion cycle, which would take him out of the mix for almost 2 years. And so he was like, guys, I got to tap. So he bails. Or I don't even, bailing isn't even the right word, because it was a nothing. He's just like, it's not a good idea. So I had given it a little bit of time, and I was like, well, that kind of blows. And then I was like, hey, Peter, I reached out to Peter. Hey, Peter, what's your thoughts on us charging ahead minus Brian? And Peter's like, well, how would that work? And I was like, well, we could do A, B, and C. And that started the conversation. And Peter's kind of like quick response was, yes, and I want to do new material. And I was like, okay, well, cool. We can do that too. And so Peter, you know, a week or two go by, and I reach out to Peter again. I go, dude, are you sure you want to do this? And he's like, 3,000%. A couple weeks go by. I go back to him again. Peter, are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, the moment I turn the screws on this, I can't turn it off. It's just we're going to keep going until the wheels fly off. And he's like, I'm in. And so Peter and I just kind of mapped out where we were going to do about a year's worth of shows. And then after about 9 months to a year, we were going to get into writing. And we started doing shows in 2019. And man, by the late 2019, early 2020, we started writing and we started releasing music as Field Day. And that's kind of how that's going. That's how it's going.
Yeah, you've done 3 singles up to this point, and each one comes out on like 10 different colors. Is that your way of sticking it to DC's anti-capitalism?
I think that I don't know about sticking it to any of the anti-capitalism thing, because I don't have any bones to pick with anybody. Like I'm a PMA guy, so I don't really have any grudges or whatever. But so we did a 7-inch called 2.0, multiple colors, came out on a German import called Unity Worldwide. Sense of Place is me. I do all the production. Cameron Webb does all the mixing, and we do the writing and so forth. Then we went in the studio. We did Opposite Land, which is a 5-song EP. So I'm kind of correcting you a little bit. It was an EP, 5 songs, same thing, me producing, Cameron Webb mixing. And then we went back into the studio and did another recording called Why, that was coming out February 4th in 2 weeks or whenever this podcast is going live or whatever. So pretty quick here, 2022. And that's the same thing. 4 songs, me producing, Unity Worldwide, and Cameron Webb mixing. So that's kind of where we are. And as far as the multi-color thing, when we first started putting out the 2.0 record, had you told me, Doug, vinyl's super popular, I was like, it is? Really? Vinyl? And I did not know how passionate punk people, I'm sure other markets too, other styles of music too, but how passionate the punk and hardcore people are about their vinyl. Now, all credit to Cortex and Unity Worldwide, they knew exactly what to do. They're like, Doug, what you do is different variations and blah, 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 blah. So I kind of had to get the crash course on that. But all of the color variants and a lot of that stuff is, one, it's because the fans are keeping it alive. And 2, because that's how Sven does it on his label. His label does multiple variants.
To end talking about this, can you express how satisfying this band is to you, as a lifetime musician? How does it feel to do this band currently?
Well, it's first off, it's the greatest thing since Swiss cheese. It's out of control. It's great because, 1, I get to work with Peter Kortner. That's huge. 2, the guys in the band are very easy to get along, and Shay is a phenomenal guitar player. Kevin's a phenomenal drummer. So the band is crazy, crazy tight as far as human beings, tight as far as a band. So there's that. The other thing is the way we do things. If it doesn't, maybe it might surprise you, but I'm not really a guy that likes to wait around or ask people. I just kind of do it. I grab the bull by the horns and start riding it. Let's go. And Field Day is like that. One of the things that's great is that the guys trust me. So they don't really, if I say, hey guys, let's go to Dallas, they're like, okay. They don't necessarily, we don't want to go to Dallas. What time? I can't do it on that day. Blah, 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 blah. My dog ate my homework. So everybody in the band is very thumbs up and yes. So that makes my life so easy. They're great to work with. the way we do the writing and all that stuff, the way technology is and all that, that's great. It's fantastic. And now, I guess you could say the response for the records just speaks volumes on what we're doing. People, we're giving, people really like what we do. And for example, this week we are again the #1 record sold in Germany through Cortex. And so and that might not mean a lot to people that don't follow that stuff, but in the vinyl world, which is very nichey and strange, fudge, thank you to the fans that like the records and love our recordings. Thank you for buying stuff. We appreciate it and we're happy to do it. We like it. And it's mind-boggling that we outsell a lot of bands. We outsell a lot of bands. And so how does it feel? It feels great. And at the same time, we don't take it for granted. We don't figure how sometimes, sorry to ramble, but how sometimes just because it's X member of and da-da-da-da-da-da, people might think it's going to do well. That doesn't always work. You got to go out there and earn your stripes.
Yeah,
so,
big time.
You know what I mean? So the reality is Field Day, the motto in Field Day, be humble and don't suck. So we're like the most humble guys in the world, and we're very user-friendly, and you can come to the shows and meet everybody, and we'll take a photo with you and all that stuff. And then the part about the don't suck, we are 3,000% committed to doing the best show we can, to doing the best recordings we can. And we do not take that lightly, and we do not phone that in at all. Like that, we play for keeps in those worlds. And I think that people feel that, like when they see Field Day play, like Punk Rock Bowling would be a great example, where they're like, all right, let's see what this band does. And we just lean so hard into a set where you go, either those guys are going to die up there playing, or they're going to have as much fun as humanly possible. Let's go. And that's the show we do. And that's what we do. And people get up front and they sing and all that. And so I think that that Punk Rock Bowling would be a great example of like, we might be guys that are just like having a great time. And we're also like, it's good. The band is really good. And we don't, just because I might have played on this record or written that song or whatever, I still have to go out there and do a full show, kill it, work, convince people, shake hands, be the best I can be. And I'm committed to that. And the band's committed to that. And that's how we roll, man. Like, that's how we do it. It's like, it's just not, I'm not going to say it's not funny. It's a ton of fun. But when we get up on stage, it's like, we are playing for keeps. Like, we're playing for keeps.
Right,
there's no fooling around. We're going to look at the live shows and you go, oh man, like those guys they're going to go as hard as we can. Go as hard as we can until they send us out of the building.
Yeah, I'd like to say that you picked a very good. I mean, being that Brian couldn't do it, Shay is the next best thing or equal, because me and Zach used to go see a lot of bands play, or our bands played a lot in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and there was a band called Faded Gray that Shay was the guitarist of. And before that, he was in a band called Tomorrow's Gone, and Tomorrow's Gone did a cover of 1 to 2 on their 7-inch. Faded Gray covered Safe. And I learned in my bedroom, I learned the solo for Safe. And then I thought, I know how to play this Dag Nasty song. And then I'd see Faded Gray play, and Shay would play that solo, and I'd be like, oh no, this guy knows how to play this Dag Nasty song.
Right. Well, I'm glad that you pick up on that, because Shay, well, first off, Shay is a shredder. He is a monster player, and he shows up ready to play. He's a freaking ninja, like totally accurate. He and we really know when we hit a weird note or whatever. He's a shredder. When we go into the studio, he is ridiculously prepared and he shreds. So that guy is, he's freaking nuts. And he can shred. Like, he can shred. His playing and how we have allowed him to we allow him a lot of room to take things in different directions, because we want him to put Shay's stamp on things. So we know how the records go. Peter and I know how the records go. And there are times where Peter will look at me and I'll look at him, and Shay has starting to play some kind of post-punk Radiohead texture against a drone note, and you're like, oh shit, he's on his own thread, he's just doing his own thing. And so it's badass because he makes us look good, and he owns it. Like, he takes it to another level, and we want him to. So shout out to Shay for freaking being a shredder, and to Ernie Ball for the strings. Thank you, Ernie Ball. I'm going to throw that in there. But that he's a monster, and the sweetest, most humble dude in the world. And he can literally that guy can play anything you got, he can do it. Like, yeah. Yep, I got you. Whatever. Like, he's got it on lock. That guy's, he's an incredible asset. And just like, he's badass. He's just badass. And what's wonderful is each recording, he's doing his voice is getting louder, like how he here's how I would do it, Doug. And we give him a lot of room to do his own thing. Same with Kevin. Like, Kevin's a beast of a drummer. And we give him a lot of room to kind of do his own interpretations of things. And Kevin will, when that guy plays, you're talking about like literally a pool of sweat around him. Like, he plays for keeps. Same thing in the studio. He plays for keeps. So the band's gnar, man. Whoa. I can't be more proud of it, because it's like, holy shit, we're in a band with Dragon Slayers. Like, it's like that. It's like, it's heavy. It's
everyone, check out the band Field Day, everyone.
Yeah. All the stuff's on streaming. Everyone check it out.
The fight lasts for hours, each ram battering the other dozens of times.
Head to head.
All right, we are going head to head. Couple of Doug's choices from the same era. We're putting the Adolescents self-titled LP, aka the Blue Album, 1981 Frontier Records, up against Bad Religion, How Could It Help Be Any Worse, 1982 Epitaph Records. Ben, which one are you taking here?
Well, I love both these records, but there's something more personal about the Adolescents album, and their lyrics kind of strike more of a chord with me. Bad Religion is a little bit more cerebral, although not even close to where they would end up, 10, 20 years down the line. Can I live in a world without We're Only Gonna Die? I don't know the answer to that question, but I know I cannot live in a world without Kids of the Black Hole. So I'm going to go with Adolescents. And I was thinking, what could go up against the Adolescents that would really be a contender in this, early Southern California lane. And the only thing that I think would probably give it a run for its money, or at least get very close, is the Germs album. I think Adolescents is right up there with the very best LPs of this era and this region. So I'm going to go Adolescents, Blue Album. Love both these records, though. They're both essential.
Yeah, I think this is an absolutely great matchup. Doug, what's your take on this?
Well, let's go with this. I intentionally grabbed both the records because what's fascinating is they're recorded kind of close to each other, like in time, like in the punk chapter. What is amazing about the Adolescents record is how it sounds pretty good for that time. So Mike Patton from Middle Class is the one that produced it. And so I think I can really appreciate the clarity of so that's the production part, where the lyrics, that's another layer. But one of the things that's amazing to me about the Adolescents record is it has the ability to be very dark and bright at the same time. 2, I don't believe up to that point I had ever heard anybody doing octave solos. 3, and this is so, I don't know if I can go, I love the Bad Religion record, and I'm going to get to that in a second. One of the things that's amazing about the Adolescents record is when you take the song Amoeba and you realize that the vocal note stays the same, but the band note and progression moves around that, that's next level, man. That was next level stuff. Incredible. Over to the Bad Religion record. The Bad Religion record, I would say its darkness and its lo-fi, this is what makes it so charming and scary. Like, that was a scary record to me. Like, they were, you're talking about, as I scratch my head, you're like, they're talking about, like, dying and oligarchy and the government, taking over, like the way the government is kind of like running you. That's some next level stuff, but more on like a crass tip, like way over on the like anti, maybe even, I don't know if it's anti-humanity as much as it's like, holy shit, we're on this train and it's moving forward and it's not going in the right direction, but it's also like highbrow, like intellectual punk rock. It's really for how dark that record is, it makes up for it in its intellect.
It's pro-humanity because it's saying the government and religion is going against humanity, and we're calling them out for it. That's the way I interpret it.
That's bitchin'. That's fucking amazing. So, I don't know if one is one better than the other. I don't know. I think they're both striking pieces of work for that time. Production value, you could chase, one might sound a little bit better than the other. Boy, man, that's a toughie for me. But if I had to, if you're going to put me to the test, I'm going to go with, and I listened to both those records today. And I know later on, we're going to talk about that other record, which I'm not going to spoil. We'll talk about it later. I'm going to go with the Adolescents record because that record's that's really something. That's a something. The songwriting's phenomenal. The production's on point. The playing is great. And like, damn, there are times where they're doing that record and it's like, this is some dark gothic shit. And then they kick into like fast parts, you go, not too shabby. So pretty cool. I think that their wings might be a little bit wider than the and I'm only going to go with the original version of How Could Hell Be Any Worse, where that's what 14 songs, 16 songs, where 14. I think they're a little bit narrower of a bandwidth, where the Adolescents one is a little bit slightly wider bandwidth. So love them both. If I had to choose, Adolescents.
Yeah, and before we go to Zach, I just wanted to mention a couple things. One is we interviewed, actually, me and Zach's first tag team interview ever for this podcast was Lisa Fancher, who is the owner of Frontier Records, and she put out the Adolescents LP. Mm-hmm. And she talks a lot about that record in that interview. So 185 listeners, if you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen to that. And we also interviewed Rick Agnew himself, and he gives us the cheat code on who does what solos on this record. And he says the octavey shit is mostly Rick, and the more kind of diddly diddly type of stuff is his brother Frank, which is fun to know, because I always wondered myself. And then the other thing is, I've always wondered this, and maybe you can finally crack the code for us today, Doug. Dag Nasty, lots of octaves. Adolescents Blue Album, lots of octaves. Is that a coincidence, or was Dag Nasty influenced by the Adolescents?
I would say Dag Nasty is definitely influenced by the Adolescents, because those are great that's a great record. But I would think that what you would really, if you're drilling down into, is look at The Damned. And that's where you're getting more of that octavey thing from that world.
Right. It makes sense. They influenced everybody. So.
Yeah. So this is a clean sweep. I'm going Adolescents as well. And it hurts because Bad Religion's my favorite band of all time, probably. But I think that they hit the stride with Suffer and the two albums that follow. That's like the money for me. This stuff is so good, though. It'd be hard. We're going head to head. It's not one's got to go, so I don't have to get rid of this. But the high moments for me on this Bad Religion LP, I love the song Part 3. I just love that it's just verses and solos, right? Like the song structure is so wild and rad, and it's like Bad Religion doing like this mid-tempo banger that they kind of like, they don't really go there again. I guess they do it a little bit in Best for You, but it's like here they are killing it. And they kind of, in the future, just go either fast or they do like the slow songs. And this is a thing I wish they expanded on a little bit. I love that song. I love In the Night. But yeah, overall, I can't live in a world without the Adolescents LP. It's absolutely perfect. And Ben, we should probably do a pod where we do it like we did the Antidote 7-inch and just brainstorm things to put against it that could beat it. The Germs is that's tight. That I would have to listen to them back to back to decide. But yeah, clean sweep. All right, we're going to do a UFO segment on the Circle Jerks Group Sex LP. Came out in 1980, Frontier Records. So the day before they go to record the vocals on this LP, Keith Morris is abducted by a UFO. You can sub in any singer from any era to replace him. And Doug, where are you going?
I'm going to go to San Francisco, and I'm going to bring down Jello Biafra to sing on Group Sex.
I love it. How do you think it plays out, and where do you think he shines?
Well, I think that in a way, we'll talk about Jello for a second. Jello has kind of an ability to blast a lot of words, but still hold decent diction. Like he has just such a kind of a quirky voice, the way he sings. And because the material, there's almost one step removed to the like surf beats in there and weird kind of like surf beats and country beats and all that. I think Jello would do a great job at being able to change different syncopations like that. So I think that it would be a good match because it doesn't really require a low growly kind of voice, a more nasally kind of like cut notes. Like cello doesn't really, sometimes he holds sustains really long notes, but on this particular record, it really wouldn't be required. He could do rapid fire vocals, like Police Truck, that same diction, same thing. And I think it would be freaking the bomb to hear the record, to hear Group Sex like that.
Dude, I love the idea. Ben, what's your take on that idea, and what's your choice?
I'm thinking about Jello Biafra singing Operation about getting a vasectomy right now, and how well he would sell that.
Could you imagine? Could you freaking imagine? If you don't mind, I'm going to say one more thing about that particular record. So I listened to, did you guys know I was a sub in the Circle Jerks?
No. What year?
Probably like 1987, 88.
So you were subbing for Keith Clark?
For Xander. Keith played drums.
Oh, yeah, duh. Yes, Xander, yeah. Okay.
Yes. So when Xander went to go shoot Straight to Hell, you know, whoever the dude is that did Repo Man, he did
Alex
another
Cox.
movie. Thank you. So when Xander went to go do the Alex Cox film Straight to Hell, one day I get a phone call. It's nerdy, but whatever. I'll tell you a stupid story. So I get a call and it's like, hey, I can't do a good Keith voice. It's like, hey, I won't even do it. So Keith calls me and he's like, dude, we need you, dude. We need you. Good money. We're going to be going to the East Coast. Xander can't do it. He's down doing some Alex Cox thing or something. I don't know, Doug. Maybe you can get with Greg. And if you get with Greg, maybe we can go. So he's leaving this message on my machine. And so I call Hetson. Sorry, long story long. And Hetson's like, yeah, Doug, you can do it. I'm like, well, when is it? And he's like, in 3 days. And I had to learn 33 Circle Jerk songs in 3 days. That's the story.
Your impression of Keith is impeccable. And by the way, 185 listeners, go back and listen to our interview with Keith Morris and compare the two voices.
Okay.
So
I tried. Oh, so I didn't finish what I was going to say about Group Sex. I promise I won't go too long on this one. So if you listen to Group Sex, what's amazing is most of the songs aren't really straight dead ahead beats until you get to like World Up My Ass. So the first few songs, listen to the drum parts. That's not like any other band. They're doing like samba grooves and just weird drum parts. It's amazing how diverse the rhythm section is going on a lot, like the top half of the record. And then when you get to World Up My Ass and you go, who can play a ride cymbal faster than that? And I was in like that. I'm in, dude. So that record is amazing. Just amazing. All 15 minutes of it. And man, drummers, check out how many different drum grooves those guys are doing in punk songs. Like, you know, they might do, but even I'm going to give some love to Hetson too. Like even Hetson doing like, rather than it being a 4-bar phrase, you know, ba-da-da-da, like they're doing these weird notes and letting the drums fill in the other parts. Very, very, very clever for a punk band at that time. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, shout out to Lucky, who is definitely not on heroin. Ben, what's your take?
Inside joke. When Keith left Black Flag in 1979, he was replaced by Ron Reyes. Mm-hmm. And Ron Reyes crushed it. Listen to that Jealous Again EP if you don't believe me. It rules.
Mm-hmm. Or that tour, when they came back, he crushed it again.
Well, you're spoiling a a joke that I'm about to make two sentences from now, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So let's have Ron Reyes replace Keith again, but this time on group sex, and see what happens. There's no way it wouldn't be awesome. And I'm talking about Ron circa 1980, not 2013 Sour Patch Kids Black Flag reunion album Ron. So just imagine the guy that you see in Decline of Western Civilization yelling, "Innocent until proven guilty," in the first 2 seconds of this record.
Oh.
You're breaking everything in your house unless you're a poser.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. First off, I love Ron. Like, I think his vocals on that Jealous Again thing, since, again, where did I grow up? Hermosa Beach, California. What's the local band there? Well, let's start with Black Flag and Descendents and stuff like Pennywise. So I'm going to tell you, of all of the Black Flag singers, Dez is my guy. Ron is my second guy. So I love the way Ron attacks a vocal. But I'm going to go back to Keith Morris for a second. Keith Morris on that Group Sex record, he freaking rips the vocals. And one of the things that I love about his thing is he's able to take different levels of dynamic inside. There's his kind of like medium scream, bigger scream, and then there's the full-blown, blaster. But it holds tone, which is great. It's not like he doesn't come off like maybe let's say like a Negative Approach vocal where it's a little bit guttural and a little bit deeper. He still keeps that kind of like high tone on it. Fucking phenomenal. So great performances inside that, and that slight nuance of being able to take a vocal and he's kind of like if let's say the vocal were on a scale of 1 to 10, he's kind of like 5 up to a 6.5, back to a 5, 9, 9, 9, back to a 5, 9, 9, 9, 10. It's like really great. His vocals are great on that record. Incredible.
Ron Reyes is my guy because for Black Flag, I mean, just a hair above Keith because he's simultaneously snotty sounding and he's also sounds like a fucking maniac who's just like pure rage and anger, but still snotty sounding. And that's like it's like a tightrope walk,
Yeah. Just proper.
With Doug talking about like the highs to lows, that's kind of where I go on this one. I think it's a semi ridiculous pick, but I want to hear his voice on Beverly Hills, and that's Ian MacKaye. Because going from like the highs to the lows and so forth, like I just think, imagine Ian singing Beverly Hills like he sings like the slow verses of In My Eyes. It would be so wild. He would knock it out of the park. Plus, it would be hilarious to hear Ian sing World Up My Ass, and then he would come back and kill it on Red Tape, so like, I don't know. Just listening to Beverly Hills today, I was like, good God, like sliding Ian's voice in here would be out of this world and totally different, but maybe not that different because, Doug, with you talking about like the intonation of Keith's voice, they both do that so well, like the lows to highs and like also like the holding back to the shouts. And Ian has undeniably one of the greatest shout voices of all time.
Oh yeah. He definitely is a kind of like a game changer in that. Some of the Ian stuff is pretty hard to sing. It's like higher register. You got to load a lot of air. Like that's challenging material. But you know what? You mentioned Red Tape, and I'm going to tell you, I got to play the acoustic guitar Greg Hetson wrote Red Tape on.
Yeah.
True.
Awesome.
True story. He's like, yeah, dude, I wrote Red Tape on that. And I was like, wow. Like the Holy Grail, like, love it. I'm still a music nerd, dude. I love music.
Yeah, this is my favorite shit is like listening to musicians I like talk about other music,
Yeah.
And on this topic of Ian singing on this record, he probably knows all the words to this record by heart in real life. I mean, I interviewed him for an article I wrote at the beginning of last year. I co-wrote, and he talked about seeing the Circle Jerks play in San Francisco when he was on tour with Teen Idols in 1980, and how life-changing seeing them play and seeing people just murder each other, and how much of an impact that had on him and Henry, who was the roadie, and Mark Sullivan, who was the roadie, and the other Teen Idols, and then them taking that back to DC and being like, all right, this shit is real. This is how it's done. California fucking rules. We're taking California with us to DC. We're going to fucking tie, bandanas around our engineer boots and just fucking destroy everyone and play way faster because the Circle Jerks did it and they rule. So that's pretty rad.
Do you remember the story about Ian saying the reason why he did those Minor Threat shows holding a Coca-Cola can was because he saw Keith Morris holding a beer and he's like, I didn't know what to do. So it's like, yeah, that's pretty badass. That's pretty badass. And for the record, I did get to see Minor Threat at Dancing Waters in 1982. There you go. For the record, just for the record, like I got I got to see that. Like, wow. Mind blowing.
Doug, tell us everything you remember. This is what we want to
know. All the things I can remember. I don't know about all that, but I will tell you, speaking of Biafra, I did see the Dead Kennedys in I want to say it was 1983. Well, I did see them New Year's night going from 83 to 84. I was at that show. And then I think I saw them the following in 84. And they played in Wilmington, which is kind of close to San Pedro, at the Fisherman's Hall. And I was in the building when the cops came in and shot tear gas in the building at the band. So those were the punk shows where you go, I can't believe I survived that. But yes, like reminds me of going to see Dead Kennedys in Wilmington, probably 1984. Cops riot squad kicks in, shoots tear gas at the band in the venue. Full venue. Like that.
Well, Doug, thanks so much for letting us punish you. We really appreciate it.
Not a problem. I appreciate you guys for doing the podcast thing and for having me out. And it's always great to talk shop, and, not a problem at all. I thank you guys for your time and, talking about music.
Yeah, man. Anything you want to close with before we get out of here?
Anything I would want to close with. Okay. I'm going to dot a couple of things. First one is if you're trying to track down Field Day, it's Field Day Sounds and figure it out, whatever, Instagram or Facebook or whatever. That's cool. If you're in Southern California, we're getting ready to do a run of shows with Game Face. You should check it out, the tail end of February. If you're in Florida, I'm going to come see you guys in the middle of March. If you're in Omaha, Nebraska, or Kansas, just a little bit before Mother's Day, we're coming to see you. So you should come see the band. Bring your mom. It might be kind of cool. And then the last thing is stay positive, get vaccinated, be safe. I want to see everybody at a show. COVID sucks, but we will survive. So sending out some posy vibes out there, some PMA. We will get through this. Treat each other well. Don't go crazy. Get vaccinated if you can, and do your part.
Love it. Thank you so much, Doug.
For sure. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.